Welcome to The Herd, our weekly series on enterprise communications news with Dave Michaels and Zeus Caravala. I'm your producer, Kathleen Lassiter. This is our final episode of The Herd. We'll be back next week with a brand new name. This week was MS Ignite. It's their largest enterprise-focused tech conference. Do you guys have any reactions from that event?
It was a very big event. I mean, I've been watching the Twitter feed. It's been huge, and Microsoft has put out a lot of announcements. There's no shortage of announcements out of this event.
It's akin to what reInvent is for Amazon, right? So Ignite, while in the communications world we're concerned with one little small bit of it, they had a ton of news around Azure and things like that. I think from a communications perspective, though, there wasn't a ton of what I thought of, groundbreaking new things. A lot of it, to me, is Microsoft still catching up to Zooms and Cisco's. When you look at a lot of the new features, breakout rooms, custom layouts, things like that, the other vendors have had for a while.
I just got, last week, a message from my son who's at college, and he was saying, I've got some classes in Zoom, some classes in Teams, and I'm really frustrated with, I prefer the Zoom meetings because they have the breakout rooms. And I told him, hey, Microsoft just announced breakout rooms. He goes, oh my gosh, my math class will be so much better now. So I think it's a really important feature, and I'm glad that they added that. Microsoft has been innovating on video so heavily over the past 6 months, I would say. They've really been, most of their announcements have been on video. And I was actually a little disappointed. I mean, the Ignite announcements were so broad and diverse. I wouldn't say video stood out as a major category, which was kind of a refreshing change. It's nice to see they're innovating across the portfolio.
I think what Microsoft is showing is that they have mastered the art of fast following. You don't see a lot of innovative stuff out of Microsoft on the team side, but they come out with features kind of a little bit after the other ones. You never hear of too many companies that buy Teams because the users wanted it. It's an IT buy. But you have to stay within a certain realm of competitiveness to let IT legitimize that.
Innovation is dangerous. You don't know if it's going to be a great idea or not. And they've got so much opportunity to, they've always been a minimum viable product. And they're moving out of that with so many new capabilities. There's no need to invent new things. They could just add things that have been proven. And I want to get back to that Azure Communication Services. That was by far the biggest surprise out of Ignite for me. This is a whole new play for Microsoft, and it's fairly significant. Right now, it's very limited to Teams type of services, chat, SMS, voice, and video services. Twilio or Vonage. They have, WhatsApp. They have contact center capabilities.
They got IoT. They got all kinds of
IoT, cellular, email. And there's so many more capabilities in there. And so for now, it's a conservative offer.
I was shocked actually by the announcement because I hadn't even heard rumors of this. But in some ways, I wasn't, because Microsoft's first target audience has always been IT pro. Second's developer, and the fact that they didn't have a developer product until now itself is kind of shocking, right? So the fact that it makes sense that they came out with it, but the surprising thing, it took them so long.
One last thing I want to highlight about Ignite and Teams was a lot of emphasis around well-being. And I have mixed reactions to this. I'm curious what you think is. They're realizing, there's always been this perception that people who work at home don't work very hard, and how do I know you're working if I can't supervise you? And what we're finding in this pandemic, and I'm certainly experiencing this, is that people are working way harder than they used to. Yeah. My workday has turned into basically awake hours, and it's really frustrating actually. And so they're implementing this new kind of thing in Teams to kind of monitor people's activities and make recommendations about you need a break and all this stuff. And I've got kind of mixed reactions. I'm not crazy about the monitoring, but I like the idea of the well-being, and so that's interesting. I also have mixed reactions to some of the recommendations. They have a thing called a virtual commute. I get the idea of a virtual commute to kind of change modes, and they have suggestions about working on your task and kind of closing up activities. But it also just seems so, what's the word, skeuomorphic? It's forced. Like we're not commuting. That's the whole benefit of remote work is we're not commuting. So I don't know.
I like the concept of the virtual commute, because I do think the time you drive to work puts you in work mode. And then when you leave work, there's this natural break where you can kind of settle your mind down and get out of work mode. You might check your emails later, but you're out of work mode. There is no in and out of work mode now. You roll out of bed, you get on your computer, you're on Zoom calls all day long, and then you go back to bed. This term Zoom burnout's been used, where productivity is actually starting to come down, right? And so I do think if the data that's in the dashboard that Microsoft created is used correctly, you could use it to manage people differently. But just as long as it doesn't turn into Big Brother, where people are like, well, you were only on this call for 40
It's very Facebookish.
Yeah.
It's very Facebookish. They're analyzing every keystroke.
Yeah, we do have to move on. There were a few personnel changes this week. Zeus, do you have any thoughts on Snorri returning to Cisco?
Yeah, Snorri, in case you missed it, Snorri Jesbu was announced that he was returning to Cisco starting October 1st as the new head of devices. And what's interesting about this is Cisco's actually, this is shocking, Cisco's never had a single owner of all their devices. They've had phones and video endpoints differently.
I've always thought that's strange.
Yeah, and when Snorri was there before, he had high-end, right, and some phones.
He had the high-end video. Yeah.
And now they've rolled it up into one person. And this is sort of an interesting hire for Cisco because on one side, you can look at the fact that, Chuck was on Mad Money and he said, we make things that go into corporate offices. People aren't going back to corporate offices. You could be like, well, why are they bringing in such a heavy hitter on the endpoint side if people aren't going back? But if you read Javad's tweet, Javad Khan, the GM of WebEx that announced Snorri's return, he said the goal is to make the device experience 10x better than being there, right? And there's already some, there are some hints of that coming out when you see some of the AI capabilities. We both have Cisco Desk Pros that's loaded with, with different features around auto pan and things like that. So
I posted a detailed review on Talking Points.
I saw that actually. Actually, that was a good review.
Mostly last year, Cisco saw pretty much a mass exodus of a lot of really good talent that left the organization. Snorri is what I hope to be maybe the first of the folks that are returning. And, so now my mind is wondering who else is going to be returning. And we shouldn't speculate on that, but the times are changing. I think it's an interesting point.
And then one more personnel change that I wanted to go over. Mitel named Scott Peterson their new CRO. Dave, did you have any thoughts on that?
Mary is running Mitel, and she had indicated that she was looking for a CRO for some time, and I think she was having a tough time deciding how to fill that role. And so I'm pleased as punch, as they say. Scott Peterson was both promoted and named the CRO, and I think it's important when people get promoted and we don't go external hires.
Awesome. I do want to move on. Did you see that Time published its 100 most influential people for 2020?
Yeah, I saw that, and Eric Yuan, CEO of Zoom, was there right beside old Patrick Mahomes. So you might think, well, how can Eric be in there? I mean, they make a video application. The one thing I will say is that, in testament to Zoom, is that Zoom is now part of our everyday vernacular. We zoom in, we zoom out, we have Zoom burnout.
So one thing I always hear about Eric at Zoom is how lucky he is, and I completely that really bothers me, and I hope it bothers Eric.
He says it.
I mean, you can be lucky a couple times a year maybe, but you don't get lucky for 10 years. I can't imagine my reaction if Eric had approached me when he was just before he started Zoom, saying, "Hey, I'm going to quit my job at Cisco, working at WebEx, and I'm going to start a competitor competing against Cisco, Polycom. I'm not a U.S. citizen. There's incredible racism in Silicon Valley, and I'm going to start this new company. Skype already exists with doing free stuff. If he would have come to me and said, would you invest in my company? I would have laughed at him and said, get the hell out of here. And the fact that he has, what's that company worth now? I don't even know. Do you know Zeus?
$140 billion is the market cap. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and he owns 22% of that.
So I have to say, no, it's not luck. I think he earned it.
And I will say the one thing about Eric that I've gotten to know him, he's a very humble person. And he's not afraid to admit they made mistakes. He's not afraid to fix them. He listens to customers well. And I think for all those things, he deserves to be on that list. He's, you could argue perhaps there's been no company that's been more the poster child of not just work from home, but live from home than Zoom.
Interesting. Well, that's it for this week's episode of The Herd. On behalf of Dave Michaels and Zeus Caravala, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. I'm Kathleen Lassiter, and we'll be back next week with an all-new show.